another edition of Getting Involved with God. I want to talk to you today about the problem of sin. It is hard to avoid the conclusion that there's something fundamentally wrong with the world. I don't think that comes as a surprise to most of you. Just take a look at the things around you. As you look at the deaths, the destruction, the disasters, the pain and the sorrow. As you look at all this and as you see this, I'm sure that you have come to this conclusion more than once. There is something fundamentally wrong with the world. Well, I want to tell you today that that is sin. And sin entered the world in Genesis chapter 3 when man sought to disobey God. God gave them a command that they shouldn't eat of the tree that was in the middle of the garden. That was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. In chapter 3, the devil, that is the serpent, convinced them to do otherwise, and Eve gave in to the temptation, and she ate of that tree. She gave to her husband, and likewise he ate. At the end of that chapter, we find that God drove them out of the garden. That is, he drove them out from his presence, because sin separated them from God. In Genesis chapter 6, we see the problem of sin growing even more, where men in their hearts continued to desire to do evil all the days of their life. And God had to take care of that because God is holy and God cannot deal with sin. But man sought to sin every day continually because they were wicked in their intentions. In Romans chapter 5, the Bible tells us that through one man sin entered the world. And in that passage is talking about Adam. And through that man, there were consequences that follow. We may call that the cosmic consequences of sin. Think about the idea of aging. Think about the natural disasters that we experience. Think about health problems and debts and destruction and all these things that we've looked at, sorrow and pain. Before sin entered the world, everything was very good because God made it and he saw that it was very good. But when sin was introduced, it became a major problem. A problem that man loved to do a lot. They loved to indulge in sin and seek sin. In James chapter 1, the Bible tells us that every man is tempted when he is drawn away by his own lusts and desires. And when that springs forth, it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is fully conceived, gives birth to death. And that death isn't so much a physical one, although it can lead to physical death. But more so, it is spiritual death, ultimate separation from God. In Isaiah chapter 59 and 1 and 2, the prophet Isaiah speaking to the nation of Israel, he says there, "Behold, the Lord's hand is not shortened that it cannot save, nor his ears heavy that it cannot hear, but your iniquities and your sins have separated you from God." Friends, sin is seeking to establish an identity apart from God. It is seeking to do everything contrary to the will of God. That is, sin is lawlessness. And every man that practices lawlessness practices sin. And sin is a problem. In fact, sometimes you may get into a situation where you yourselves realize you've got yourself into a bind. Because, friends, sin will keep you there longer than you intended to stay. And in the end, it will cost you more than you intended to pay. We need to seek God and seek his will for all of us. We need to do the right thing and find out how we can take care of this problem of sin. And I want to encourage you to think about these things today and join us next week as we talk about how to deal with this major problem of sin. But I want to leave you with two things. Sin is a problem that needs to be taken care of. If we don't take care of it, it will lead us away from God, and we don't want to be separated from the presence of the Almighty God. Thank you for joining us today.